Hello, everyone. JuJuan Buford, and welcome to the NextOppSocial broadcast, where we discuss, examine, and share actionable content about all things entrepreneurship. Look, if you are looking for a forum to learn from, network with, and glean invaluable insights from entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs, you've come to the right place. Look, we encourage you, of course, to check for us on FB, Facebook as well, at the NextOppSocial after show for additional commentary. So we can have discussion after discussion, additional networking where you can do a deeper dive if you'd like. Of course, the link will be in the notes in the description below. And look, if you like what you hear, we simply ask that you turn that like button blue. Comment and share feedback. We love feedback. We eat comments like Skittles, and share with others. So the mighty YouTube algorithm knows that we are serving you and delivering value to the entrepreneurial marketplace. It gives us the feedback we need to improve and be more people. So without further ado, I want to introduce to some of you, definitely the audience here, Mr. Jeffrey Edwards, CEO of Middle Ground, JLE. I met this gentleman literally, has it been a month, man? It was about a month ago.
About a month ago.
Yeah, about a month ago. We were basically, I don't know what you call it on LinkedIn, ear hustling. We were checking out each other. And end up connecting. I was like so appreciative of what you were doing. I love the fact that you are putting entrepreneurs on and giving them the chance to share their stories. We need more of those mediums in our marketplace. And I'd be remiss if I did not give Chef Godwin of Young Village his flowers. So much respect. This brother crushed it during the pandemic while other people were putting their heads in the sand. He actually continued to expand and grow. Just intelligent, bright, hardworking. Godwin, I have a picture of you a handful of years ago when I saw you downtown walking around with your dishes. And every time I saw you, Godwin, I was like, what in the world is this brother doing? He's smiling, he's happy, walking around, gleeful as all get out. I'm like, it's raining, the weather is not pretty, people are coming at you sideways, and man, you just went for the gusto. Like you were on 10 every time I saw you. I was like, this brother gonna crush it. Like winning is a foregone conclusion. So, so I'm excited to be here. And of course, you know why we're here. Talk about the topic that has been first and foremost on my mind. There was a report that came out, it feels like almost a month ago as well, where a lot of perspective was shared in terms of what's transpired in the pandemic and more specifically over the last 10 years in terms of the African American community and the fact that while our spending power has gone up dramatically over the last decade or so, our net worth went backwards, actually dipped by double digits. And for me, it was fascinating because I'm like, how does that news report come out and it barely like really make it to circulation? Like I saw people chirping about it for maybe 2 or 3 days, saw a couple Instagram posts, but beyond that, I was like, how's this not a big deal? How's this not a big issue? And I wanted to have a discussion with you two fellow entrepreneurs to get your feedback and your thoughts on the matter and how entrepreneurship can be a solve for that problem. Because I believe entrepreneurship is a way in which to overcome this gap, this deficit that's continuing to grow in terms of wealth accumulation within the African American community, and quite frankly, within Detroit proper, period. I firmly believe that our community, we're like canaries in the coal mine. I think it was Lonnie Guinier who made that. The first time I heard that metaphor, she said, we're canaries in the coal mine. Typically, if there are issues going on in our community, it's only a matter of time before it makes its way outside of our community and the rest of America start suffering the same ills. As you are well aware of, I'm on 10 about this. I can go for the next 20, 30 minutes and not miss a beat. But conversation just be me talking. So definitely, what are your thoughts on it?
I think you have to look at the model that as society in America that we have is more geared towards being, you just starting to hear people talk about trade school, go to trade school again. When I was coming up in the 90s, half the people I graduated was in VOTEC. And some of them wanted to start their own company, whatever it was they were doing in VOTEC. But as of late, any commercials, radio, TV, get a degree, go get a nice job. And it's not a bad living to make 6 figures somewhere, but you are making it for somebody else. You're not being an owner and you're employing people. So now they're calling this the Great Resignation because so many, over 5 million people, I believe, have quit their jobs because the pandemic made you really look at everything and have a reset. Am I doing what God created me to do? I might be making 200,000, but it is what I really should be doing. Am I really happy? Because I don't know what my expiration date is because people was dropping like flies, unfortunately, during this pandemic. So I really got people looking at, well, it's a lot of, you got Google, YouTube, you got so many outlets on how to learn whatever it is you got skill set at to figure out and start working at it. And more people are starting to do it. So you might see probably the next 2 years a nice dip upward, hopefully in the African American community of entrepreneurs. Because we always been spending, when I learned in business school at Wayne State, 1.3 trillion every year. And I find that crazy. Most of the stuff is made overseas for $2, but we're spending almost $300-400 for some Jordans. They got the 96 model. Awesome shoes, very comfortable, but you could have spent that $400 to maybe start a business.
Yeah.
Or get stock or something else to build you some wealth going down the road, but we ain't been looking at it from that perspective, in my opinion.
You just said a lot. Go ahead, go ahead. I want to hear.
I was also going to agree. I think that the biggest thing that our communities can do would be to invest in financial efficacy and literacy. The end all be all is that when the household understands their impact and what it means to be sustainable within a capitalist economy, you no longer have homes where your 18-year-old moves out immediately, more so if that 18-year-old is staying at home and doing what they call nesting, which is a common practice that happens across the world for families to begin to raise their overall net worth as a family, a familiar unit. We can start to see that growth. It's not too often that the most common source of investment in a business comes from friends and family, but because most of our friends and family aren't positioned well, we can't take part in those same types of investments. I know personally people that I went to school with that started businesses very much the same as me, and their experience was a little different because they still had a little bit of seed money, a little bit of advice as it goes to generating credit, generating business credit, and investing in the resources such as having a bookkeeper and having someone on your taxes and to make sure you're not paying too much in taxes. These types of things that we don't have common as conversations or forefronts of conversations within our familiar units. That piece is very strong and is going to continue to help push us in these directions beyond the ownership, because you can't have a business, but even without that background, which happens a lot, not from a demographic point, but just from a kitchen point. In the kitchen, a lot of chefs, a lot of people have excellent dishes, excellent pieces of food that you'll watch. They'll make millions and millions of dollars over, but without that business acumen, those businesses go out of business. That's why in this industry, 1 in 5 makes it past 18 months. And then of that, only 60% of those make it past 3 years.
Yeah. Both of you shared a lot. I want to unpack a little bit of it. You talked, Jeffrey, about the ideal of it being okay to earn 6 figures at the job. And look, I do not dissuade people or defecate in people's cornflakes when they talk about the ideal of getting the job and starting a business on the side. Because quite frankly, if there's $1.50 table, you take both. You take both. You don't have to choose or. But for me, I guess when I think about that narrative, right? Go to school, make good grades, get out and get a good job. I think for many of individuals, because of maybe social media and a whole bunch, and just the narrative in general, it's been so ingrained in many of us, that when I hear that, I remember almost 20 years ago as an investment advisor when I was looking at statistics, looking at demographics of households, not just in the African American community, but nationwide. And when I discovered, man, that quite frankly, only 2% of US households really earn a 6-figure income on a consistent basis. Only 2. Like only 2 out of 100 earners were doing that. For me, that told me everything I needed to know, right? About how that narrative was like, it was a false trope, if you will. Like that really doesn't happen. And I think if more of us were really aware of just how, and of course, if that's nationwide, it was very pronounced in the African American community. I was doing some statistical research literally a couple of days ago for one of the businesses that I'm launching. The median income in Detroit and one of the better zip codes, I'm going to use 48221, right? So we're talking about Livernois, 7 Mile, 8 Mile, 6 Mile area. The median over there, man, is like between 35 and 45,000.
Wow.
The unemployment is like double digits. And it'd be different if those numbers were anomalies, but they're not, right? And so the ideal of simply going to school and make good grades and going out and getting a good job hasn't really been the answer for us. For me, when I think about the individuals who quote unquote did well, whether it was family or growing up, just watch and observe folks who are getting it in, I think for a lot of people, entrepreneurship is a choice. In the communities I came from here in Detroit Metro, it wasn't a choice, like it was a lifestyle, like it was survival. You had to have a gig on the side in order to make it through. And so for me, I always found it kind of puzzling that we don't speak of entrepreneurship as frequently as we should. So I think about that. And you hit the nail on the head of skilled trades. We know what happened there. We used to have skilled trades in our community, and then they got shipped out to the birds. And ever since, we've seen, quite frankly, options for people to dissipate along with it. Most individuals are not going to go to college. And I think I was looking at a statistic the other day where it said 12%, like in areas where collegiate attendance is high, like only 12% within the African American community actually attend college, matriculate, and finish.
Wow.
Right? And so once again, when you take those statistics in its totality, once again, for me, I just find it kind of puzzling that we don't talk about entrepreneurship, not just simply as a method to survive, but a method to thrive. And of course, Godwin, I love what you said, man. I have a lot of clients who are not from the United States. I have a Nigerian client. I have a lot of clients in Dearborn. So, you know, the Arab community and the different subsects of that community. I have a lot of clients in Amtramck. And so I've seen the way they get down. They'll have 3 generations. And when I have a couple clients that are Nigerian, and literally grandparents are up on the second floor. On the main floor, you have the family, the parents, if you will, and then you have another family down in the basement. And so you literally have, if everyone's working, you literally have 3 generations bringing in income. So people might be looking at them sideways, but quite frankly, that's $150,000, $200,000 house, even if they are working, quote unquote, working class jobs. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it's interesting that, once again, I was watching the news shows, like I was watching the reports, and it was the same tired narrative. It was like, we need to become more financially literate. I agree. We need to become more financially literate. Talking about more individuals need to, quote unquote, invest in them to get ahead. I agree. Being a former investment advisor, I promote that full steam ahead. But I'm glad we're talking about alternative ways of thinking and alternative approaches to resolving this issue. Because I just don't think the conventional approach is going to put us at a place where we actually make some ground on that wealth gap. I think we have to really start thinking about things on a more organic level, right? In terms of how we support.
And then you do, in our community, you don't have a lot of examples of people that actually started any type of business and they still doing it 10 plus years later. Thrive. More people made money in sports, sold drugs, and then became a rapper, or hit the lottery. That was big, late 80s, early 90s. Or maybe a 1% actually, I'm going to start this shoe company, for example. Okay, so they do shoes, whatever they over there. Oh, dang, they got a Cadillac. They in West Bloom. Oh, he turned that into a real company. Like, oh, so they might push it to the side instead of, what made you want to do that? What steps did you take? I'm thinking about doing this. And that might be another factor to it as well, that we don't really see it. And then we might not ask questions on, how did you get started? I'm thinking about doing this because from my experience, it's not everybody. You might have people around that say, you can't do that. What you trying to do? Be Hollywood. And if you listen, you might not keep going after it.
Yeah.
But you don't, like, I know I learned to my business class, I want to do this. How many people say, oh, that's a great idea. Let's look online right now and see if we can learn about it. And now you're getting more enthused. Like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
That might be a big factor too, probably.
Yeah.
I guess one of the questions I would pose about that, is it that we don't observe the entrepreneurs in our midst? We don't see them, or is it we don't respect them?
Yeah. I also think that current media doesn't promote that idea or aspect in the same way. I remember growing up and on the TV screen, we would see, like with the Jamie Foxx show, for example, he worked in a black-owned hotel. That was an aspect.
True.
The Wayans brothers, they were entrepreneurs. Their family was entrepreneurs within that show. They were a lot of the Cosby Show, Different World, a lot of those shows that we would constantly associate, and a lot of the media that we would constantly associate with, put people of color within those aspects of being entrepreneurs, business owners. And so the idea of it wasn't so far-fetched. Whereas now, the example is basketball, rapper. You don't really see a lot. Like Chameleonaire is one of the top investors within tech right now, which is a very telling thing, because we don't really know that. We don't really hear a lot about that. But the video game industry alone is a $300 billion industry.
Oh, man.
$9 billion of which is inside the United States right now. And then the thing about it is 70% of that commerce contribution is coming from people of color, where only 10% of the people of color making those is getting that money. So you think of this, like, we're contributing 70% of that $90 billion revenue stream, and only 10% of the people getting that are people of color. But we don't talk about it. We don't promote it. What we don't see commonly within our media forums. But putting that attention to it, putting that spotlight on it, is the best utilization of platform to make us aware. Going to the schools and talking to the kids and getting them involved in these aspects of, did you know that you can get involved with this? I think they said it was a statistic that people 18 to 44 spend at least $76 a month on monthly subscriptions.
Wow. Yeah, I want to lean into that a little bit more too. The ideal of promotion, right? So I mean, that I'm of the opinion that because we haven't really given entrepreneurship the respect that it deserves, like you said before, Jeffrey, there is an overemphasis on being a celebrity, right? That's what I would call it. The whole celebrity mindset, right? Because now it's no longer just basketball or sports or hip hop or music. Now you have individuals who want to be social media celebrities. But in the meantime, no, there are business owners and entrepreneurs in our community who've made livings like building a business. They just don't get to shine. I mean, what about the salon owner? What about the barber? What about the guy that owns the towing company, or the individuals in our community that do lay roofs for a living? They're doing carpentry. Quite frankly, the individuals who have their insurance agencies up and down the street. There are entrepreneurs who are right within our midst who are getting it in and do have some longevity and success behind them. But I feel like it's like we, for so long, and when I say we, I'm going to be a little bit more specific, African American men, Black men, it's almost like we ceded the floor. Like we allowed other people to tell our narratives. We allowed other people to tell our stories. And for me, that's why this is so important, right? Because the bottom line is, the reality matter is the majority of people are not going to make it to a basketball court. The majority of people are not going to make it on a stage somewhere singing or dancing or whatever the case may be. The majority of individuals aren't going to become social media magnets, right? But
true,
you have individuals like Godwin who can start up a restaurant, and with the business acumen, intellectual and academic acumen, a willingness to go to work, quietly build an enterprise. The bottom line is most small business owners aren't going to become multimillionaires, but you have a better chance of creating financial independence and freedom as an entrepreneur if you're successful. I think like everybody wants to be a multimillionaire until you have to put on the overalls and do what multimillionaires do to get there, right?
Yeah.
The price.
And we are very visual. Like I remember a Mr. T movie back in the 80s, DC Cab. And it was a scene in the movie where when they finally turned their cab coming to a thriving business, he would come in the hood decked out as a hardworking man with the shine, because he saw when the dope dealer came around with the Cadillac, I want to be like him. You working hard. I don't see what is the results of what you're doing. So he came back around showing you can work hard and still make the money like he making, but the cops ain't gonna be on you. So
Yeah.
we definitely, in today's world, we definitely are more visual. Okay, you entrepreneur, you have a brick company. Okay, your house at what your clothes look like, what your money looking like. Because you could have a portfolio like Bill Gates, but to the average young black man or female, I don't see nothing.
If you're not stunting,
You
if you're not
you
trying,
just walking around every day
yeah.
like me. Like, so is it really working? And it's weird that we had that mindset that we need to see is working.
It's so funny you said that, man. Somebody actually came for me on Instagram a couple months ago, and I thought it was funny as all get out. Like, someone basically posted something to the effect of saying, JuJuan hasn't bought a new car in 6-7 years. And I know this person, right? And so I'm looking at the post and I'm like, dude, you don't have credit where you can get an apartment. Okay, so you got the car, but you can't put a roof on your head. Who would you rather be? You want to be walking around or driving around in a $40,000, $50,000 car, you can't even keep a roof over your head. Or do you want to have enough credit to be able to get a car, acquire a house, or do whatever it is you want to do? Like, one of the most important lessons that I learned early on, I had to put myself through school. I had to pay to be there. Like, I wasn't born on third base. So I remember I was working at art my sophomore and junior year at the University of Michigan, right, out in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
And you're working at Art Van, and it didn't take me long to figure out that the people who had the shine were not the individuals I should take aim at. It was usually the 40 to 50-year-old guy shuffling around, regular tennis shoes, probably bought it at Walmart, regular jeans, regular t-shirt. They'd roll in there just unassuming as all get out and literally just drop $20,000, $30,000 on furniture. Like it was no thing. And then as I started networking that environment and being invited into people's homes and really see how they get down. So they weren't shiny, but man, those vacation pictures looked really nice. You know,
because wealthy people don't waste money.
Yes. And then
they ain't gonna walk around with Coogee on to the side like Biggie would say, but check their bank account. It's on swell.
Yeah. Like I remember there was a secretary that I knew that we all talked about, and keep our identity, sure make names, it was a secretary at you, and we all knew she was sitting on like millions of dollars in her 401k. And she would wear the same, she would wear the same clothing. Like it would be the same clothes 2-3 times out the week. And if you didn't know any better, people would talk about her. They'd be whispering, chirping, making jokes about her. And man, and when she retired, man, she went out like for real. Like you saw like how her lifestyle changed. For me, I think a lot of it has to do with mindset. And once again, we don't have this straightforward adult conversation. And I also want to be careful too, not to say that it's all mindset or that somehow it's unique to the African-American community. The bottom line is people from low socioeconomic strata tend to exhibit these behaviors. I don't want to discount something you mentioned as well, Guy. When I look, what transpired in 2008, we know who that impacted worse than anyone else, right? When the housing market, we know African Americans got disproportionately impacted by that. Still to this day, even during the pandemic, we heard stories about how African American business owners oftentimes were the last to actually receive access to money, like a lack of capital.
40% permanently closed in 2020.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And we know some of that is systemic. Some of that is individuals walking into a bank, sitting in front of a micro lender or private investor, and the person taking inventory of their complexion rather than their character and acumen and deciding not to sign on dotted line to fund their business. And that happens a lot. I was just listening to some report recently about how a mortgage company got caught up because an African-American family ended up showcasing their home, and the home ended up being appraised. They ended up getting approved for one amount. They turned around a number of months later and then had a Caucasian family pose as them, go through the same process, and all of a sudden get pre-approved for 150% more than the African-American family did. And all of a sudden now, because it looks like a white family's living in the home, the house ended up being appraised for 50% more than initial appraisal value. That happens a lot. I think that has a real impact when we talk about accumulating wealth. within our community. We have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, it's a combination of a lot of things that affects why we're not here. Definitely, it starts with, do we understand how money works and how a
The
business
cycle of the
works?
dollar
What is the business
yes,
model?
yes.
Because you gotta know the paperwork side instead of, I want to open McDonald's. Okay, that's cool, but who gonna do bookkeeping? Who gonna do this? Who gonna do that? Huh? Like, you can't sustain it if you don't know that part, because IRS gonna be knocking at your door like Debo. You owe us half of that, bro, because you ain't do none of that. So give me all that. You about to close. And then you like, dang, I gotta start over. So you gotta take all those steps into effect and do your research to understand the landscape and how you navigate. And it do help to have a team of Avengers, people of all diversity, because unfortunately in America, that still matters. It shouldn't. We ain't on that Dr. King truly, where it's just about the content of your character. They made a movie about it with Samuel Jackson about two black guys had the bank and had a white guy as the front man.
The banker. Yes, man.
It's crazy that, but it happens. It shouldn't, but it's still part of the unfortunate situation. You got to play chess and understand the landscape, know how to move. We definitely do got to
100%.
put more emphasis into learning more about instead of just doing, because jumping out there and you don't have no understanding of how business works, someone might take advantage of you, or you might just plummet when you didn't have to.
Yeah, I think that we would benefit greatly if a financial literacy and financial efficacy acumen was tied into just benefits as well as your education. I don't understand how we can graduate from 8th grade and then even from high school without understanding how basic economy principles work. I think more than 50% of the population has no idea or understanding that their dollars contributing back into a community can help to impact or change that community. Those things are lost arts. Even further still, as we're talking about just trade and those impacts, I think I was reading somewhere that over 65% of the population of India is no longer able to make their authentic recipes due to how vast automation has hit their respective food markets and their respective food industry. That same thing is going to hit a lot of us here in the United States, especially with the increased focus on internet due to the pandemic.
Yeah. Man, there's so many different ways we go there. Both of you hinted at something, I was waiting on it, but it's something I think about a lot, right? So I purposely decided to come down here to Space Lab today and patronize them. I make a conscious decision if I'm going to spend my monies to every now and again make my way towards Yum Village. There's another restaurant that's right next to it. I feel bad about it, so I can never remember how to pronounce the name of it. But I make an effort to support African-American business owners whenever I can. And it's not just for the sake of supporting African-American business. I'm gonna be transparent about that too, but when it makes sense. And I firmly believe it makes sense most of the time. And for me, I think about it like this, right? They say the African-American dollar circulates in our community less than a day.
Wow.
Right? Less than a day. When you look at other communities, their dollar circulates, and I'm not going to speak the specific statistics. I haven't looked at it in about 5 years. There are other communities where the dollar circulates days, weeks, almost more than, I'm talking more than 7 to 10 days, like almost 2 weeks. And for me, it's interesting, right, to reflect on the impact of that, because that basically means everybody else is spending our dollars. Everybody else, that's how they get wealthy. They're spending our dollars, right? We're giving our money to other people, but not only do we have a difficult time, depending on the industry you're in and demographically where your business may be located, number one, not only are you having a hard time acquiring dollars outside of your community, but then on top of that, the people who are walking up and down the street and driving by your business aren't supporting your business either. And once again, it was just one of those things that really isn't talked about. And in my mind, that's just basic economics 101. Like, you don't need a degree to understand the impact of that, right? Where literally other people who don't live in your community spending your money, you're putting their kids through school. You're actually funding their businesses. You're funding their work. I had someone mention to me the other day. They were like, look, it's because the quality of service or because African Americans don't know how to behave. And I'm like, look, we need to get rid of that narrative right now. I have clients that are not African American. I've sat in restaurants and listened to other Arab American entrepreneurs who shall remain nameless, literally dog their cousin and brother out. Just talk about them like nobody's business. But at the end of the day, they still wake up in the morning and still patronize them anyway. I've had that conversation one too many times with people outside the community, outside the African American community, where they dog each other as bad as we. You speak ill of each other from time to time, but that does not stop them from funneling their dollars into their community because they understand the impact.
Yeah, we don't stick together in that regard. And then you look in the urban communities, it's not a lot of stuff as if you go to the suburban area. Mm-hmm. You ain't got to leave. And you wouldn't think everybody not making money, but they have everything right there, and everybody's going to all the stores, the restaurants, everybody making money. But you go to urban cities, you might see a Myers and that little strip mall, and that's it. It won't be built out to where you got a theater, you got more shopping, you got mall or something else. You might have a little pocket, and that's it, or fast food stuff. So I can see how the dollar don't go that much through our community, because just go to Novi. Go right over there, Novi Road. There's so many different stores in the area. You ain't gonna leave except you going across the street to go 12 Oaks. Let me go get something to eat over here, or it's a Walmart over here. Let me go here. Mm-hmm. If you just go on Finkel in Wyoming, you got fast food spots, gas stations, a Family Dollar. That's about it. So it ain't too much you're really gonna just chill right there and do. Even if you go, Grand River, Southfield Freeway area, they built up a little. It's still not the magnitude of these suburban areas where everything's right there. So you just park your car and go shop for the next 3 hours. It ain't too many areas in a lot of urban cities, in my opinion, that's like that, where everything's right there for you, because they feel, well, if we put it right here, they're going to be crime. They ain't going to keep it up. And that's not always true. You got knuckleheads in everybody's community. It's just, I guess policing needs to be more enforced and respected, to where you will come and lock it down. Like, we know not to go across 8 Mile and act a fool. They ain't playing with you. Mm-hmm. That need to be the same mindset in Detroit with the police department as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm thinking about two things as I listen to you. Like, it's the whole chicken and egg thing, right? My initial gut reaction is to say, for the African American grocers that do exist, and I think there's only one left. I found is the grocery.
No, there's one in California, or that owns one.
Yeah, but I think the one off of Grand River that you just mentioned, I don't even think are they still owned by? I'm
not sure.
Private owned by an African American, but in any respect, even when it was, though, if we don't shop there, they can't expand. If we don't shop there, they can't invest.
True.
If we don't shop there, they can't do the things that are necessary to level up and provide the services we're looking for. It's like one of those things where I think to myself, okay, we want to complain that there's a certain degree of service and amenities, and I get that, right? The things that we want aren't in our community, but those things will never be in our community if we don't support the business owners that are currently there. How are they to invest? How are they to level up? How are they to be more responsible for the marketplace? The other thing that I think about too, that you mentioned, like when you drive through Detroit Metro, and look, once again, I don't defecate people's cornflakes. You got a vision, you have a dream, you're passionate about something, go get it. But the other thing I think about is something Godwin just mentioned. And man, there's an entire industry being born right now that we're like not focused on at all. Like a lot of the opportunities that exist in the digital space, a lot of the opportunities that exist and the monies that are flowing in those spaces, where we're primarily the ones funding those spaces. Yeah, I already know you about to go in, Godwin, because I think about that all the time.
So here's how crazy it is too. So I'm in this basketball league. We play on Wednesday nights. And so a gentleman here is talking to me about an NFT restaurant. And the idea of NFT to me sounds fascinating. Eventually, every unique identifier item will be an NFT. Concert tickets, sports game tickets, you name it, even recipes. So he's telling me about the fly fish. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but it's a gentleman by the name of Gary V.
Yep.
Gary V and a chef started this restaurant, and they only sold, I think it was 1,000 coins, 1,000 invitations to this private club restaurant at 4 Ethereum each. So pretty much this thing hasn't even been built yet, and they were able to get $12 million for this concept of a restaurant based off of the NFT sale of it. And you still got to pay to eat the food at this thing when they finally build it and you come in.
Wow.
Man, talk about winning.
Yeah, Metaverse.
I think Gary Vee has professionally cooked a thing in his life, but he was able to partner on a $12 million project that was funded by the people, just off of their their idea of it. And I say all that to say that even in that case, you think of a market like Detroit, would you be able to do something like that in Detroit? And then if you were able to do it like that in Detroit, would your demographic matter? Like, would you be able to do that as an up and coming chef of color versus as a chef who is not of color? And then the value association of that. Like I say it all the time, I think African food should be expensive. I think that when I look at a restaurant like Prime and Proper, where you go in there and you're going to spend about $350 just on the steak, and you're coming out of $1,000. But this food from Africa, which probably like jollof rice is probably like the birthplace of all red rices, you know, from across the transatlantic slave route, Mexican rice is included. And then the fact that you still have to import these goods to make these dishes. Why is it that when someone looks at that food, the moment it goes over $18, it's too expensive? But you can get served macaroni and cheese in a pan with whatever this cow ate whatever type of grass, so the cheese is supposed to be special, and that macaroni and cheese is $25. No one bats an eye at it. Or desserts, like people spend $9 for a slice of cake, no problem. But now you go,
Oh, I think we may have lost.
that need to spend a lot more of our time in these avenues. Internet. It's like Nipsey Hussle, the late great Nipsey Hussle, said it best, that this is the next great gold rush. From back when everyone was moving to California, this is the great equalizer. At this time, more so than any other time, because of the pandemic, it's almost an equal and level playing field, provided you're willing to do the work. I think statistically, 20 years ago, to be an expert in a given field, you had to spend a lifetime. Whereas now, in order to be an expert in the field, you just need to spend 2 years. And you're essentially a registered expert within that field, just based off of how much we have access to resources in the digital space.
You know, I agree with you 100% in one respect, but I think it cuts both ways too, because that was my experience. I started out in the banking and investment advising industry, and you're absolutely right, right? Before you had just the expansion of the internet covering every aspect of our lives, there was like a mentorship you have to go through, right? So you start working at the agency, and the bottom line is, in order for me to learn what they knew, it wasn't necessarily readily available online. I had to pay the dues. I had to sit down underneath them, run joint appointments. I had to have the legal pad at hand, taking notes. I had to go through the process in order to become the professional that I needed to become to bring enough value to the marketplace to earn the income that I was taking aim at. And there was a process to that. And you're absolutely right. Like a lot of things that I learned back then from them, someone can literally, like you said, jump online. But because of that, I think that's also a problem too within the entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? Because there's something called skill stacks. There's something called experience. There's something called, quote unquote, paying your dues, not from the standpoint of paying your dues underneath someone, but having the experience and having the entrepreneurship muscle and skills that have to be accumulated for you to expect to be successful. So I was having a conversation with a young lady a couple of days ago, and she's been an entrepreneur for 2 years. No, maybe a year. She's been an entrepreneur, right? And she called me up because she was frustrated because she's observing me and she's observing some other individuals in our circle. And she's, you all are crushing it. You're doing this, you're putting up the numbers, you're acquiring clients, and I want to be where you are right now. And I listen to you and the conversations you're having with entrepreneurs. I listen to you and just how you just seamlessly drop nuggets and gems that people need to hear and know. And I told her, I said, you need to understand that the reason why I can pick up the phone and cold call 100 people and be good with it is it took time to develop that. It takes time to understand how to properly qualify someone, to find out whether or not they're your ideal client. It takes time to even understand what is your ideal client, right?
Yeah.
Who's prospect A, B, or C client? It takes time to understand how to read body language and how to position yourself when you're having conversations with people, right? How to listen to how to watch the cues that people give you in terms of their body language, their eyeballs, how they're moving when you're having conversations with them. The nuances, how to lower your voice and raise your voice at certain times to get their attention. Like, these are things that you just aren't going to pick up on. And I feel like this fast food attitude that because you started a business today, that tomorrow you're going to be a multimillionaire, I think that ruins a lot of entrepreneurs too. For 12, 16, 20, some people, quite frankly, damn near 25 years to become a physician, or the different internships and different residencies. And the highly skilled professions all have these processes you have to go through, right? And then you think because you've chosen entrepreneurship, money's gonna fall from the sky and you're gonna have the same success as someone who spent 15, 20, 30 years developing their craft is gonna have. It just doesn't work that way.
No.
And I feel like the internet in some ways have ruined people in the sense they're not willing to pay the price. They're not willing to become as knowledgeable as they need to be, as skilled as they need to be. Entrepreneurship is skilled trade. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Entrepreneurship is skilled trade.
I,
And you got to be willing to learn the skill.
I think that I agree with you. I think that oftentimes, you know, in order for, like, when I'm speaking on it and when I speak on the activity of it, if you can't expect to make it off the bench and not practice outside of going to practice. Like, a lot of times some people feel that because of how convenient the internet is, an example, you don't have to go as hard. But you also have to admit too, there also needs to be a level of maturity within that individual, not from, oh, you're immature in a sense, but just that level of maturity that comes with being a serious advocate of what you're trying to do with your time, purposeful intent. So if I want to be like, I'm spending a lot of time and energy to make myself a blogger and a YouTuber and all that stuff online. And I'm not saying I'm going to do it overnight. Like, I'm acknowledging that there's going to be time and energy and studying that needs to go into that craft. And so I feel that if a person does do it that way, where, you know, and you have things, you got to sleep, you got to eat, you got your family, you got to take care of all of these things. Objectively speaking, while you remove all of those things and you take a person who spends 24 hours each day within that 2-year time period, just a monster, just dedicated to this only. I'm going to shoot this basketball only. I'm going to learn C+ only. I'm going to learn Ruby on Rails only, or whatever. They can make that leap, but they're not going to do it. And that's where the difference lies. Your nuances that you've developed that come with time, I think can be developed by the right individual, should they be willing to invest that time, to learn from the greats. As a mortgage banker, I was in the top 10%. I kept a $26 million volume selling mortgages. And this was only after after 1 year of learning what a mortgage was. But it came from me. At Quicken Loans, they record every single phone call that you have. So you can literally look up a phone call and listen to them. And success one thing about success is it can be replicated. It's not this far-fetched thing if you invest the time in it. So all I did was I looked up the top bankers, every single person who came out in that email every month that was in the top 10, and I just listened to their calls every week. And eventually you start to pick up some of these things, and they weren't my own, but you start to understand these nuances. And then I started to also invest in it. I started reading the books on mortgage lending and finance. I started to care about these things. As you were talking about these different aspects of prospecting, of building out your clientele, of understanding how to properly qualify people, that comes with the maturity of wanting to want it as well. Like the person has to want all of these things out of this reason that they're waking up, this reason that they're doing it. And that is just as important a piece as anything else that comes with it. If they don't have that, if they don't desire this want out of this activity, then they're just going to be floating with no direction.
Yeah.
Man, y'all brothers speaking some truth, because I was saying you got to get it out the mud. You got to figure it out. You got to do the research. It ain't going to happen overnight. I was able to grow my podcast so far, figuring it out step by step. And there was a lot of times I look back on it, man, why was you doing it that way? But I didn't know better. Like, okay, we got middle ground with JLE, where we treat you like family tagline. Okay, you need to make your guests feel comfortable to share their story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an introvert, so talking around people like, man, you really got to interact with people. But you got to get comfortable in it so they can be comfortable, because you got to put the right energy out. Yep. And the more you research and learn and watch other people's podcasts I've done, now it's second nature. Then I went live streaming. Terrified the first time I did it. Not even gonna lie. But the fan base started wanting more, so you adapt and you adjust to what the audience might want. But you got to put the work in. There's nothing on this planet that's just, unless you were born rich, you can have a snap in your fingers like a genie. You got to put the work in.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking not only do you need to desire and be enthusiastic about the fruit, but you also have to envision yourself enthusiastically doing the work. Mm-hmm. Right? You got to bring that same energy. You know, I tell people all the time, in business, oftentimes in the beginning, you're doing a lot of things that you don't get compensated for. So later on, you can be compensated for things you no longer have to do. But there's an ugly duckling stage in there that you have to be willing to go through. So upset, guy. Like I said, I think about you all the time. I'm like, I should have been catching footage of this guy when I was watching him climb and build his business. Like that was just the footage of watching him pound the pavement, knock on the doors, making deliveries, having conversations with people. Like watching Godwin was actually a reminder to me that you never know who's watching.
That's true.
You never know who's watching you. Because I know I wasn't the only one watching this brother. And I had made up my mind. Years before he even opened up his restaurant, I was like, oh, he got it. It's a wrap. He's just waiting on the universe to conspire in his favor. Switching gears, as we start to wrap up here, what are the things, I start thinking about, okay, so what are the solutions, right? What are the things that we can do in the entrepreneurial ecosystem to make the ground more fertile, to create a situation where entrepreneurs have more of a fighting chance to succeed and really take agency and have ownership in terms of what's going on in their community? Because I think that's ultimately what this is all about. It's about actually having equity in what's transpiring. There's a saying out there or an axiom, they say a rising tide lifts all ships. And for me, I think that's very true. However, you need to be in the ship, right? You need to be in the boat in order to rise. And a lot of us aren't getting in the boat, or we're jumping in the boat, and because we have built it, it's holes in the bottom of it and the water's trickling out and we're still sinking. So I start thinking as an individual, and then I start thinking about the cadre of entrepreneurs that I'm conversing with and engaging on a regular basis. What can we do? So for me, like I said before, I was really excited, Jeffrey, when I learned about your show. So I think that's a part of it. I think putting out content like this is a step in the right direction, because people can see that, no, you don't need, once again, you don't need to fall into the celebrity lifestyle in order to be well off. You can start up, quote unquote, conventional at least for our times, conventional businesses and do very successful and do very well with it. You can, everyone doesn't have to, it's gonna be real, everyone doesn't have to open up a shoe store or selling t-shirts. There's a diversity of different businesses out there that we can avail ourselves. For one, I just pay attention to where people are spending their money. I watch where people spend their money. And I think to myself, is that a business that I have the skill stack experience, or do I have the network to go out and build? Because if they're spending the money there, obviously that dog has legs. So I think about that, and having these conversations and ideally promoting these type of conversations will hopefully spark someone to make a decision to, number one, at least get in the boat. I think about part of the conversation we had earlier, right? About how a lot of entrepreneurs are out here building their business, but no one's had a conversation with them about operating agreements and non-circumvents and non-competes. No one's had a conversation with them. Your LLC, you got self-employment tax. If you have an S or C corp, you got to be worried about non-taxable dividends and reasonable income. Like, people aren't having these conversations with business owners, having conversations about target marketing and who is your target market, core values, core focus, understanding how you want to serve, how to create a competitive moat, and putting processes in place so your business is systemic. For me, that was the greatest heartache. Like, I firmly believe that a lot of that 40% of business owners that closed permanently specifically during the pandemic, a lot of those businesses would have still been open if they would have just had business credit. If somebody would have sat down and talked to them about the importance of establishing business credit, getting your DNB and getting trade lines in place. So even if you go out of business, it's not a situation where you're getting hurt doubly. If you're using your personal finances to fund your business, if you're using your personal credit to fund your business, if you go out of business, not only do you take it on the chin and you lose your business, but now personally, you've put yourself at a deficit, right? So have conversations. I think about what are the mediums and ways in which we can disperse this information in such a way where the average Jerome or average Rebecca or whoever can get the information and apply it to their business. So I think about that a lot, right? And mediums like this are effective, but how can we be more systemic about that? And getting business owners to a point where they're not operating just simply as a team of me, but they've scaled to a team of we, right? So they have systems in place, their business is growing, it's scaling, it's generating more revenue. And I don't want to go on and on about this, but I just thought about something else. Like, I had a conversation with a business owner yesterday. It's like, people specifically, not just Detroit Metro business owners, but I'm speaking specifically African-American business owners, we got a weird relationship with money. Like, I was talking to a business owner yesterday and she said, I don't want to earn a lot of money. I just want to earn just enough. And I was thinking, you are passionate about your business. You are passionate about how you help. She says, yeah. So you do want to make an impact and help as many people as possible. She says, yeah. I said, well, it's going to take capital. You're going to need capital to expand your business. Like, earning money isn't always about buying the watch or buying the car or buying the clothing or trying to stunt. Capital is the lifeblood of your business. Like, getting by is not good enough. Like, you have to earn enough income so you can hire the staff, so you can get the IT and the systems in place, so your business can grow independently of you, so you can really be a CEO and go out and market your business and find the talent that's necessary to continue to grow and expand your business. If you're working in the operations all day, every day, if your business doesn't, if the doors can't open and close absent you, you don't have the space to really grow the thing.
I'm with you. I will be a billionaire at some point so I can help more people. But I guess we can pass the information forward that we know of what we've learned. If we come across other entrepreneurs that's starting out, because even though we're all done different things, the foundational pieces is invaluable knowledge that they can take whatever they're working on and get it to the next step. Because knowledge still is the key, in my opinion.
So, Godwin, I'm interested to hear from you, right? Because you're out here in these streets, you're building, you're growing, you're scaling. As an entrepreneur, when you look at the ecosystem in terms of resources and the availability of information and talent around you, what are some of the things that you feel like should be in place or that you would like to see in place that you feel like might be at a deficit, right? Where certain resources were available to help you build your business stronger, faster, get to the milestones that I know you set for yourself?
So for me, personally, I think that there are a good amount of resources out there right now directly related to being a business owner, being an entrepreneur. It's just the advertisement of those items are lacking. I just watched a YouTube video in January. It was a young lady who the entire YouTube video was about grant opportunities to apply for the start of the new year. And the video was, there were about 10 different opportunities in there. And I personally only knew about 2 of them on my own. I think that it just, there's some accountability on a lot of us to not accept it as an excuse that this information isn't readily available to us. It should be, and it isn't, and that's never going to change. I hope it does change one day, but until it does, we just have to pick up the slack and do it. The other thing I would say is that what I wish there was more of is resources that are navigating this growing industry of digital space that's happening right before our eyes. In 2006, there was a game called Elder Scrolls Morrowind that released a microtransaction for $2.50. It was the first time ever that a video game was charging for downloadable content in addition to having already paid the $50 for the game. And now I think there's on average about $50 million in microtransactions that happen every year. My mother-in-law spent, I think, $400 on a mobile game with microtransactions. Even further still, Erykah Badu was doing living room concerts last year in which she would charge anywhere from $25 to $75 right from Facebook Live. And the way that these apps are so integrated now, like the barrier of you getting separated from your money is seamless. Now, if you say, oh, if you talk on Facebook Messenger and you say, oh, $, an interface will automatically come up to set up a payment transaction for independent of you doing anything. It's there, and big companies are using these tools already. You can buy Domino's pizza with emojicons now, but
Wow.
as a small business owner, I can't even think of doing anything like that. So I definitely feel like it would be a great utilization of resources if there was time and energy spent on educating us within these communities that are often categorized as suffering from systematic issues, which is still the case, that we can overcome that with some of these gap closers like digital space. I think there are people who are buying digital jewelry in the metaverse now. There are people who are buying digital clothing in the metaverse now. And that's a programmer, that's someone who has an understanding of graphic design, as well as a securitization on the back end. So there's a lot within that commerce puzzle that are starting to happen digitally that we have no excuse not to be including that within our communities, because this stuff is brand new. NFTs just hit the market within the past 10 years. We just started using cell phones 30 years ago. So, you know, this is all fresh technology. There should be no reason why certain groups of people are being excluded from it because of whatever they're saying. Like, this is new tech. we should be at the table, and if we don't get a seat at the table, we should stand on it.
So, Godwin, I guess the question I'll pose is, I know I acquire my information and insight from what's going on from conversations with entrepreneurs, or I sift online. I'm nosy. So if I see someone having success, I just firmly believe I only spend so much time expecting the roots. I want to know where the fruit's coming from. And whether it be YouTube, it used to be Clubhouse. I don't know. It's not a lot of useful information, as far as I'm concerned, being disseminated there all the time. At least I can't find the rooms all the time. But utilizing social media, observe and see what people are doing, and then taking onus upon myself to do the deep dive and do the research. I'm just curious to know, like, what venues or mediums do you employ to learn about technology and learn about information? And what suggestions would you have to individuals listening to this? right?
I use quite a bit. Like I'm always on How I Built This, Polygon, Venture B. So I like go through a lot of the main ones, and then I like to just check it. So lot like back before, I remember growing up in school, used to not even be able to use the internet. Like the internet wasn't a recognized source of information. It was like, yo, if you're using the internet, you gotta get some sources. Anybody can post anything on the internet, and that's still the case. Anybody can post anything on the internet. So I kind of read a lot, and then I try to get like sources. Even if you like take something, like for example, like if you take something like a LucasArts or a Disney film, like you get an opportunity to do a presentation with them, they're still gonna want to know the sourcing of the information. You're not just gonna be able to be like, I got it off the internet. They're gonna check the sources. And because of those types of things that still happen with like major mainstream companies, just in my head, I always know, no matter what, if I'm reading something, just to make sure that I'm like taking it upon myself to like source that information. And then if that particular thing that I'm reading online doesn't have sources, then I try to find sources myself. Otherwise, it's just recreational literature. It's not gonna, you can't use it in an argument. It's not gonna hold any type of discernible weight for discussion. I definitely wouldn't use it for personal growth and progression at that point, you know. So it's just there. It's just, you know. But that's how I approach it. Like I try to find the knowledge that I'm looking up, and then I read it. And also I try to stay active with it. I try to read things that aren't just pertinent to me as a subject. Like I just got done reading this book, Sapiens. Yep, exactly. These types of things keep a fresh perspective on the great game, if you will. And then having the sense of mind and wherewithal to make sure that you're intentional and purposeful with what you're learning and how you're applying that knowledge. It's not just looking up wine, and I'm not keeping into context the application of why this wine is a study, but at the same time, because of what I'm trying to do with my position, I'm also notating the book. Why aren't there African wines? Why is there only a South African wine? Why can't there be wines in other regions when you can grow grapes anywhere just about with the proper tools? So is this another systematic thing? The liquor industry is one of the few industries still in the United States that has barred regulation. So when you look at it, people of color can't even get in that industry because of legal rules, right? It's legal racism in a sense, almost.
So I'm curious to hear your feedback as well, Jeffrey. You're still relatively new to entrepreneurship, right? And as you're going through your journey, what are some of the things that you feel like you wish the resource was there? Or you felt this is at a deficit? I wish I knew where I could find this information, find this content. What are the things that you feel like would make the entrepreneurial ecosystem healthier for someone at the stage of their business where you're at right now?
I guess for podcasting, thankfully there is a lot of people that's put out stuff to give you an idea what to do. But just starting as an entrepreneur itself, I would definitely say research. Whatever it is you're trying to start a business in, research the market, what it takes to make it, what is the competition in their competitive advantages or pricing. Find all the information you possibly can about whatever it is you're about to venture into. And then after you get all the information, then I guess reassess what's my approach in this landscape, how I want to do it. What's the pros and cons? Formulate your plan a little bit more, then implement. See what works, what don't work. Come back to it and see, okay, I know the market says people might charge $50. I want to do 70. Okay, that's too much. Let me do maybe 45 or whatever it is you're doing. And then go back and see what gains you might have. And maybe try to find a mentor that's in that field as well that might be willing to give you some information as well.
Yeah. So for you personally, though, let's say a genie popped up in the back seat, right? I put you weird 3,000-pound brown man pops up behind you, says, "Hey, you're bringing value, and I see it, and I want to invest in your business," right?
Okay.
And keep in mind, it's a mythical creature, so it doesn't matter how big or how small, doesn't matter how expensive or inexpensive. But there are three resources that are going to be made available to you to take your business where you want it to be a year from now, 3 years, 5 years from now. What
Mm.
request to make?
3 resources. One, I would say advertisement, TV, and I would need to get it across the globe marketing.
And this has been a
I would need
consistent.
probably more sponsorship. Because if I have the marketing, I can put on every platform. Because I'm noticing, just me observing, if you're on YouTube watching anything, there's constant commercials. If you're on any other platform watching anything, Hulu, not Netflix, but Hulu or something, constant commercials. So if I got the advertising, that's going to put me on all platforms everywhere. And then with the marketing, that'll be more just the brainwashing effect, as I call it. Because if you're seeing it everywhere, billboards, you can't go nowhere across Michigan or any other state without seeing something middle ground GLE. But let me check into that. Like the old thing at night, late at night on Saturday, you ain't hungry, but you 5 or 10 pieces of commercials by 1 in the morning. I want some pizza.
Right.
So they have to keep putting the eyeballs on you. And then with the sponsorship, people connect with brands. Ford brand, for example, is partnered with my podcast. Oh, Ford mess with him? He doing something. Because a lot of people are visual. Who really mess with you? You ain't got no people. You all right, but Ford mess with you, or Jay-Z or whoever. Oh, I'm missing out now, which is weird because you could be on the ground floor. But
Right.
we associate stuff like that. So I think those three things will put me across the globe the way I need it to be.
So
And I'll be good.
The one thing I've been hearing consistently from both yourself and Godwin is this whole advertising piece, right? That there
You
needs
got
to be
to.
more resources, access. There needs to be a greater emphasis on advertising what resources and avenues and venues are available for entrepreneurs to avail themselves up to level up. So I've been hearing that consistently. And frankly, some of it also kind of steers its way into the marketing piece too, like how business owners, quite frankly, can avail themselves of resource to market themselves more effectively. I've been hearing that a little bit. I guess I'll wrap up with you, guys, but do you have anything else to contribute in terms of what do you feel like, what else needs to be in place here in the ecosystem, particularly here in Detroit, to make the ground more fertile so we can actually take a little bit more not take a little bit, we need to take a lot more ownership in what happens in our community?
Yeah, I do. So it was I hate to use like a comedy sketch, but there was this guy named Long Beach Griffey. He used to be a Target, and the Target's near and dear to my heart. I was a worker at Target myself, and he went on to quit Target and do these YouTube videos full time. He recently released a video about entrepreneurship and a bank, in which the bank had stereotyped him as a person of color for the type of business that he wanted to open. I think that there should be greater acknowledgement over blue ocean strategy type businesses within entrepreneurs of color. A lot of, till this day, I will never let these folks live it down, but I was turned down for both African restaurants and also the concept of ghost kitchens, which I was pitching through incubator programs as early as 2006, based off of my own experiences of not having to be able to sustain a full rent as an up and budding business owner. How can you compete with a company like McDonald's and Chipotle and Qdoba? Last year and the previous year, all of these companies posted gains through the losses of the pandemic. The first year of the pandemic and the second year of the pandemic, Amazon could have given every single employee on the entire planet that worked for Amazon an additional $150,000, and Amazon still would have posted a profit from the
Yep.
previous year. 2
Yeah.
years old. We just don't get enough leeway to make decisions for ourselves within our respective communities that are gonna uplift and better us. Until those types of things start to happen, we need to make more attention to it, increase the platforms of it, and also hold the content providers that feed us this media accountable. I'll still bring it back up. The Wayans brothers, Jamie Foxx show, all of these early examples of what Black people should be doing with themselves are some of the reasons why now me growing up acknowledge entrepreneurship as something that you should do, because this is what allowed those characters. At the end of the day, I just want people, when they're sitting down, there's nothing wrong with also working a job and getting your money. You can make $100,000 a year and do something with that. Have a couple things on the side, or have some good investments or savings. Like, it's possible to live well and fruitful and meaningful. We just have to take it upon ourselves to put some pen to paper and write down what that looks like.
Yeah, I can agree 100%. And I do want to provide a little bit of clarification for people who may not understand the difference between blue seas and red sea strategies. Basic conceptually, what you're talking about, Godwin, is in a red sea strategy, everybody and your mama, they're bloodying the water. Everybody's hunting, everybody's eating in the same space, so they're bloodying the water, as opposed to blue seas. When you look out in the blue seas, you don't have that many predators all fighting over the same prey, so the water isn't as bloody. Basically, you're going where the competition isn't. Right? You're going where the opportunity is fruitful, the ground is more fertile, because everyone isn't there basically dirtying up the water, so to speak. I think about that. I hate to use the examples. I know at some point in time somebody's gonna call me out for saying this, but it's just a reality matter. There are literally blocks in Detroit Metro, like you'll walk for 5 minutes and you'll see 4 or 5 barbershops and salons, like within a 5-minute walk. That's red seas. I mean,
Very, very rare.
they're very red. They're earning income, but they're not scaling because they're all competing for the same dollars. The water's too bloody, as opposed to starting up a business that someone else hasn't even thought about. So something else I think about too, and I don't know why my mind went there, but I remember there was an interview where some of the representatives from Black Lives Matter hemmed up Hillary Clinton years ago. And they basically came to her and they said in so many words, look, what's your agenda for Black America? And I remember watching that exchange. And I remember thinking to myself, why would you expect Hillary Clinton to have an agenda for Black America? Like, it's our responsibility to critically sit down and think about what is it that we want? What is it that we need? What's our agenda? And then we take our agenda to the individuals who are responsible or have some agency in terms of whether or not we're able to execute that agenda. I think about that a lot here in Detroit metropolitan area. A question I oftentimes ask entrepreneurs, which is why I thought it was interesting to ask the question, that pose question to us as a collective, is what is the agenda? What do we feel like we need in this ecosystem that we can be in agreement with, where we can say to politicians, we can say to brokers, individuals who have say so in terms of what transpires in our community, look, these are the things we want, these are the things we need, and hold people accountable to that via social media, but also Main Street, right, in real life, particularly come election time and when we see people being appointed to do certain things. So that's crossed my mind as well. But look, I appreciate you two taking time out of your schedule to participate in the discussion. I thought it was worthwhile. I felt, why it should have been 100 discussions like these after that. Like, to me, that's some like post-reconstruction stuff going on, right? Seriously. Yeah, that was pretty sad statement. And to me, it raised a red alarm for literally wealth, like our asset base, our net worth have declined. That's real problematic. So I'm glad we were able to have this discussion today. And of course, for our audience, as always, thank you for taking the time to listen. And I'll begin, right? If you like the content that you heard, if you're feeling the discussion we've had before, once again, turn that like button blue. Definitely share, comment. That way, once again, individuals are aware of the conversation we had. It lets the mighty algorithm once again let other people know that we were delivering value and benefit to individuals. And of course, as always, we celebrate success in advance. Of course, my colleagues, Ms. Nina Payne and Rochelle Wilson, I expect them to be making a return real soon as well here at NextOppSocial. And of course, brothers, your time, I celebrate your success as well. Thank you.
Appreciate you for having me, man.